The Catacombite Mother Joanna. Lydia Afanasievna Sanina in the world was arrested in 1947. It happened as follows. One day, a man came to her house pretending to be a believer. He had a penetrating, heavy glance and a dark and kind face. "Oh, how terrible," muttered Lydia Afanasievna quietly. She repeated this many times, forcing the embarrassed man to depart from her. After this, she expected arrest every day. 2 weeks after the visit of this Judas, she was arrested. "What have you arrested me for?" she asked her interrogator. "I'm not a thief. I'm not a bandit. I'm not some kind of trickster. I've never done anyone any harm." In reply, one of the Czechists laughed and said, "If you were, we wouldn't have touched you. Do you recognize the Soviet Church?" "No, I don't," replied Lydia Afanasievna. "Why?" asked the Czechist. "Because Soviet power does not recognize God, which means its church doesn't either. The only church I recognize is the Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church." She wasn't beaten or tortured as they did to many other prisoners, but they subjected her to more refined torments. Having confined her to a narrow solitary cell, they didn't allow her to sleep. Every time she collapsed from exhaustion onto the floor. There was no bed after all. They loudly clamped the door bolts. They summoned her to interrogations in the middle of the night. Her sister, who was arrested with her and who had a 9-year-old son in freedom, was given a tape to listen to. Oh my God, it was the voices of playing children. The name of his son was shouted out loud. They were the moral torments with which the executioners sought to break their faith, forcing them to recognize surgeonism. One of the investigators tried to apply hypnosis, but did not attain his aim. Another began loudly to blaspheme the Mother of God, and, lo and behold, was immediately paralyzed. A sore pain pierced him, and for several weeks he was taken to hospital. At the trial, as during the interrogations, the sisters replied that they couldn't recognize the surgeonist church insofar as it was supported by the God fighters. "Yes, it's our church," confirmed the judges. The trial took place on Holy Wednesday, the very day on which Judas betrayed Christ. The judges decreed that they were guilty of affiliation with the highly dangerous sect of the true Orthodox Christians, this is the Catacomb Church, and were sentenced to be shot. "Don't weep," said Lydia Afanasievna to her southern sister. "They're only doing this to frighten us. They won't shoot us. But if they do shoot us, what a light death for God." She was right. After pausing for the news of the verdict to shake the condemned women, the judges declared that the sentence of capital punishment was commuted to 25 years forced labor. "No, God will not allow it," said Lydia to her sister. "For what?" "For 2 glories from the 17th Kathisma written on the scrap of paper, which the judges declared constituted the spreading of religious literature and betrayal of the homeland. In fact, the term of imprisonment was later reduced to 7 years. In her last spiritual will and testament, written about a year before her death, Matuska Joanna wrote that the judge's words, "execution by firing squad," didn't frighten her at all. She was actually exhilarated that her suffering would soon be coming to an end, and that she would at last go to the bosom of the Lord, having suffered for the faith and the true church. However, at the last minute her inhuman pain and unbearable suffering resumed. They were sent to the building sites on the Volga-Don Canal. In the rain and the cold, under a biting wind, they had to endure the unbeatable burdens of camp fire. There on the Don St. Matushka, the winds are strong. We walk in the wet, it's pouring of us, and we didn't fall ill. Only with God's help was Matushka able to bear the full measure of suffering and live, even in the labor camps with the miserly food and hard living conditions. She tried to observe the fast times as best she could. During Lent, prison guards would intentionally give her nothing but meat to eat. She would remove the meat from the soup and eat only the broth. In 1955, Lydia Afanasievna was released. Soon, her sister Maria was also released. Together with a mother who had returned from prison still earlier, they lived a quiet life, secretly praying and waiting for the regeneration of Orthodoxy. Lydia Afanasievna would later relate, "My parents were persecuted and oppressed by the godless authorities for being true to holy Orthodoxy. My father Athanasius was placed under guard and given the choice: recognize the declaration of apostasy or not. His Christian conscience and human decency didn't allow him to betray the Church and Orthodoxy. He wasn't destined to leave prison, where he reposed in God amidst the sufferings and horrors of incarceration. My mother, Anastasia, later Nun Agnia, spent 25 years in prison. She left it unbroken and without having succumbed to the violence of those who wanted to force her to betray the Holy Church and Holy Orthodoxy. Around them, a small catacomb community was formed. God sent them to a faithful priest, Father Mark, and in 1960, Lydia Afanasievna received the first monastic tonsure. In 1974, she took the monastic vows of the small schema and the monastic name Seraphima. Shortly before her death, Mother Seraphima took the vows of the great schema and received the name Joanna. In her final will and testament, she warned, founded by Stalin's henchman, Metropolitan Sergius, his Moscow Patriarchate, can only repress and spiritually mutilate, making lawlessness the law. Its mutilation is not immediately noticeable. Its spiritual venom penetrates the minds of Orthodox people drop by drop. The psychological objective in this is to break down the spiritual immune system to make them ready to accept the Antichrist. The internal is replaced by the external. Remember, belief in lies and demonic allurements destroys your soul, said the holy hierarch Ignatius Barzaninov. Recall these words of the holy apostle Paul as often as you can. They perished because they refused to love the truth and so be saved. And for this reason God shall send them a strong delusion that they should believe a lie. Let not these words ever come true for us. Mother Joanna reposed in 1998.